In this video we are going to take a closer look at the October Deathwatch tournament result, as well as the whole ordeal about Space Marine win rate and GW's claims that it is all due to beginners holding back the success of the faction. Due to the large number of tournaments for this month, the ones covered in greater detail are the London GT, the US Open Chicago, the US Open Kansas, Fantasia Fanatic where Mikael Klangeby once more destroyed everyone, mild spoiler alert right there, the Dragon's Lair Open, as well as the Kippers Melee 2022. Over the course of the video, we will go through all the relevant results and lists in an attempt to find out whether the Deathwatch can continue despite the poor Space Marine win rates. For the final part, I will offer my personal conclusions and a quick wrap up.
Welcome to SwissHammer, your channel for modeling in Warhammer 40k. My name is Tammer and I will be guiding you through this video.
Diving right into the tournament results, after the whole balanced status slate and Metawatch debacle I covered in previous videos, I focused on the Space Marine stats of three major events in particular. The big London GT with almost 700 players, as well as GW's very own US Open Chicago and Kansas with roughly 200 players each. Given GW's ongoing claims that Space Marines are actually doing just fine and that it's just beginners causing the poor win rate, surely one would see the great success of the faction at such highly competitive and prestigious events. For the London GT, out of 685 total players, only 97 played Space Marines, which is 14.2%, and just to give you guys a rough idea, back at the London GT 2021 that took place around a year ago, Space Marine attendance was 22.4%, which had already started a bit of a decline, but was still within range of previous averages of roughly 25%. Furthermore, this year, only 3 Space Marine players made it into the top 50, out of which 2 were Blood Angels and 1 was a Space Wolves player. Furthermore, only 9 Space Marines made it into top 100 and only 39 into the top 350, which is roughly halfway in ranking and makes about 40% of the players. Hilariously enough, out of these 39 players, 18 were Blood Angels, so if anything, not only were Blood Angels the most represented Space Marine chapter of this event, but they also performed the best. Ultimately, what this means is that the few competitive players still sticking to Space Marines are betting on Blood Angels, which are certainly top competitors among the faction at this point. At the US Open Chicago, things look just as bleak for Space Marines, with an attendance of 16.3%, only 1 Space Marine player with Dark Angels was barely making top 50 on rank 49, and an abysmal 26.5% making the top 100 only, which is about halfway in ranking. At the US Open Kansas 2022, which took place towards the end of the month, things looked slightly better, with 18.1% Space Marine attendance and 6 players making it into the top 50 and 42.4% making it into the top 100, which is more in line with the numbers that we saw at the London GT. Hilariously enough, a Blood Angels player won the US Open Kansas 2022, no doubt prove enough for GW that Space Marines are doing just fine. All jokes aside, as it happens, Shock Tactics is a decent secondary choice for Blood Angels, which means that the recent balanced status slate change for Space Marines reinforces them as the current top pick for Space Marines, for those that can't handle the complexity of the Deathwatch Army of Renown, that is. Anyway, there were 4 Deathwatch players present at the London GT, 3 Deathwatch players present at the US Open Chicago 2022, and 1 Deathwatch player present at the US Open Kansas 2022, none of which managed any big breakthroughs. Nonetheless, at the London GT, Michael Morrison ended up on rank 102, going 4-1, losing his first game against Chaos Demons, then scoring 4 wins against Tyranids, Tau, Death Guard and Chaos Knights. As we will see in just a moment, he went with a fairly unique list that happened to do better than the current meta Deathwatch list designed by Mikael Klangeby, which 2 lower ranked players brought along. Ultimately, it is of course always a matter of different elements coming together that make the result, but I found it interesting nonetheless. Looking at his list, for HQs, he took the good old captain on bike with the armor Indomitus, a librarian in Terminator armor, as well as the Primaris chaplain on bike with the beacon. For troops, he went with one Indomitor with 4 Boltstorm aggressors and a single bolter Inceptor. He then rocked 4 Proteus kill teams, 3 of which somewhat resembling the old Costello-style kill team iteration, but he spiced them up with Deathwatch frag cannons and or Melta guns in addition to plenty of hammers. The 4th Proteus kill team only featured 7 guys in total, but it was again filled with Deathwatch frag cannons and Melta guns. It is interesting to see frag cannons making a reappearance and doing this well. On a side note, friendly shout out to the Vanguard Tactics Deathwatch player at the US Open Kansas tournament. The heavy Thunderhammer limit is 1 per 5 Deathwatch veterans. As a result, your 2 Proteus kill teams rocking heavy Thunderhammers on both the Sergeant as well as a single Deathwatch veteran are invalid, even though Battlescribe wrongly allows to make that sort of pick. Any additional heavy hammers have to go on Vanguard veterans, which have no 1 per 5 restrictions. Let me know if you need any coaching, sorry couldn't resist. Moving on to the next tournament, the Fantasia Fanatic XLII 40k, an event featuring 98 players over 5 rounds. Here Mikael Klangeby once more destroyed everything and everyone with his signature Deathwatch Army of Renown list. Mikael did a full tournament coverage on his channel. I highly recommend checking it out and hearing from the man himself. The link is in the description. In a nutshell, for HQs, he was playing the classic 3 picks: Basic Librarian, Primaris Chaplain on bike with the Beacon and Optimus Priority, as well as a Watchmaster. He then has double Indomitor kill teams, heavy with Bolter Inceptors, double Klangeby style Proteus kill teams, as well as a single Spectrus kill team with 5 Last Fossil Eliminators and the Lord of Deceit Warlord train on the Sergeant. The latter in particular is really great to go for the long Witchel secondary in the majority of matchups. His matchups were Orcs, Chaos Demons, Tyranids and double Imperial Knights. Congratulations once more to Mikael for yet another tournament win. At this rate, IKEA is better going to release a Klangeby shelf for storing tournament trophies in the near future. Moving on to the next tournament, the Dragon's Lair Open, an event featuring 50 players over 6 rounds. Here we have a single Deathwatch player, Jared Gomez, going 3-3, ending up on rank 26, making a fresh attempt at a drop-out heavy Army of Renown list. His matchups were as following: Round 1 a loss against Space Wolves, Round 2 a win against Chaos Knights, Round 3 a loss against Nits, followed by 2 wins against Imperial Knights and Genestealer Cults, and then finally a loss against Chaos Demons. Looking at his list, this leans heavily into first turn Alpha Strike, with the 4 drop pods loaded with a Proteus kill team each. Similar to the approach that Michael Morrison took at the London GT, 3 of the Proteus kill teams were loaded with frag cannons and had vanvets with either heavy hammers, regular hammers or lightning claws for close combat support. The 4th Proteus kill team then just consisted out of the standard wets, but these were equipped with plasma guns and power sword. He then also brought along a Spectrus kill team with 4 Last Fossil Eliminators and a single Incursor, also upgraded with Lord of Deceit, and the company champion upgraded to a chapter champion, and finally for HQs, a captain with Combi Melta and Thunderhammer, a chaplain with Combi Melta, and a librarian with Primorphic Resonance and fortified with Contempt. Certainly an interesting take on our Army of Renown, though the success of such drop-pod lists is highly dependent on going first, and I think this is also reflected in his overall score. Nonetheless, for those looking into including drop-pods, this is certainly something to take inspiration from. Moving on to the next and final tournament, the Kippers Melee 2022, an event featuring 100 players over 6 rounds. Here we have once more a single Deathwatch player, Travis Gibson, going for 2 with the Army of Renown, ending up on rank 30. His matchups were as following: first 3 wins against Imperial Knights, Chaos Demons and Tau, followed by 2 losses against Chaos Space Marines and Tau, and then the last round another win against Craftworlds. Looking at his list, He went with 2 HQs only, namely a librarian in Phobos armor, always love to see those, upgraded to a chief librarian, taking both Mantle of Shadow as the third power, as well as the Psychic Mastery Warlord trait. When points allow, this is certainly a great way to invest further into a librarian. He then also had the Primaris Chaplain on bike upgraded to Master of Sanctity with optimized priority and the Beacon and Chalice. For troops, he then rocked a single Indomitor kill team with 4 Boltstorm Aggressors and a single Bolter Inceptor. Furthermore, he had 3 Proteus kill teams, which loosely resemble Costello-style kill teams, with the Thunder Hammer Black Shield and the Heavy Thunder Hammer on the Sergeant, but he then went for different combinations of Chainfist Terminators, Veteran Bikers, a single Van Vet and comparably cheap Vets. Best to check out the exact loadouts in the link listed in the description. As the 5th kill team, he brought along the Spectre's kill team with 5 Last Fossil Eliminators, and last but not least, to round the list up, a Judiciary with the Tomb of Ectoclades. Personally, I like to invest into Oathkeeper when bringing along the Judiciary to extend his ability to heroically intervene and with that make better use of his Fight Last ability, but with War Zone Nephilim and CP being more tight than ever, this has become somewhat of a luxury nowadays. Deathwatch aside, shout out to Chris Mousseau on rank 32, going also for 2, playing Imperial Fists. He played an amazing list featuring a Fire Raptor, my personal favorite, as well as Centurions and Suppressors. I included his list in the description. It is certainly worth a look for anyone interested in putting a Fire Raptor into good use, perhaps even in the service of the Deathwatch, for those willing to experiment outside of our Army of Renown. All in all, with these latest tournaments' results in mind, my personal takeaways are as following. Looking at the larger events, while Space Marine attendance continues to be relatively poor, Blood Angels and to some degree also Space Wolves are clearly the new go-to choices for those still dedicated or desperate enough to compete with Space Marines in competitive play. Deathwatch as ever remains a niche pick, which is likely due to the complexity of our Army of Renown, which is currently the only way to still score some decent results in a highly competitive environment. With the fate of the Army of Renown in January 2023 still unknown at this point, it is unlikely that this is going to change for the time being. On the other hand, Mikael Klangeby's list still delivers results, winning a 98-player GT no less, and it is likely that even in case the Army of Renown will be discontinued, such a list can be successfully played with regular rules and slight adjustments. Speaking of adjustments, when points allow, I really like the idea of the Chief Librarian upgrade. I think both the third Xenopurge Power Mantle of Shadow, as well as picking the Psychic Mastery Warlord trait are good options for Deathwatch, and the Librarian remains a staple of our competitive lists. Outside of Mikael's meta list, it is interesting to see frag cannons reappear in great numbers, and for those willing to gamble on going first, we also have a 4 drop pod example of the Army of Renown. Drop pods or not, I think the Spectre skill team with Eliminators and the Lord of Deceit Warlord trait is an absolute must in War Zone Nephilim due to mission settings and our reworked secondary the Long Vigil, and we are seeing this kill team appear across a huge variety of lists. These changes aside, I think it is best to just hold tight and await the upcoming January news or the lack of such. To wrap things up, over the course of the video, we have looked at Deathwatch October tournament results, including the London GT, the US Open Chicago, the US Open Kansas, Fantasia Fanatic, the Dragon's Lair Open, as well as the Kippers Melee 2022. What stands out here is of course Mikael Klangeby winning the Fantasia Fanatic, going 5-0 with the Deathwatch Army of Renown, sticking to his by now highly established and successful list. Beyond that, specifically for Deathwatch, we have seen the reappearance of frag cannons across multiple lists, one attempt at a drop pod heavy list, as well as the occasional upgrade to the Chief Librarian. On the topic of Metawatch win rates in Space Marines, both their attendance as well as success continues to be low at major events, despite GW's claims that it is all due to beginners being bad at playing the game. Space Marine attendance at the larger events was between 14 to 18%, well below what it used to be a year ago. Nonetheless, Blood Angels are currently the competitive go-to pick for the average tournament goer still playing Space Marines, while Deathwatch remains a niche pick, certainly no small thanks to the high complexity of our Army of Renown. All numbers aside, I absolutely love to see Imperial Fists go 4-2 with a Fire Raptor list at the Kippers Melee 2022. Make sure to check that one out yourself, it is well worth it as far as I'm concerned. With no Space Marine news on the horizon, and potentially only 2 months left on our Army of Renown, I will keep my fingers crossed for the time being. So that's it for the Deathwatch October tournament results and our third tournament win in War Zone Nephilim. What do you guys think about these particular lists and results? And what is your take on Space Marine tournament attendance versus GW's Metawatch analysis? Any changes you are planning for your own lists, like a drop pod or two? Let me know in the comments. Finally, I would also like to mention that there is a SwissHammer Facebook page where I will be posting links to my videos as well as articles I find of interest. I do read a lot about the hobby, but not all of it will always end up as its own video. I look forward to seeing you there as well. I do also have a Patreon page. If you like my content, any additional support is greatly appreciated as it helps me invest into future videos. As always, thank you very much for watching, guys. Your continued support is greatly appreciated. I hope you have been enjoying this video. Give me a thumbs up if you did, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks again and see you next time.